Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be looking at what's happening to healers in patch 10.15. Again, a bit of a spoiler alert, there is mainly one healer that's getting a huge rework and other healers are getting somewhat smaller changes in terms of talent improvements or more talent choices. In this video I want to look at the snapshot for healers both for Mythic Plus and raids in terms of their performance, in terms of, again, we're going to try and measure healer performance using sites like Subcreation and Warcraft logs. But a huge disclaimer, if you're looking at Subcreation, it is not a perfect algorithm. We're basically going to be using this as a baseline to determine which specs are more popular in high-end Mythic Plus rather than anything else, and I might give my opinions about how the healer balance is looking right now and possibly in the future. And on top of that, Warcraft logs mainly shows HPS, which again, HPS is not the only defining factor of what makes a healer strong in raid, so there's a lot of disclaimers in this video. But first of all, let's go to Holy Paladin, and Holy Paladin is getting a pretty sizable rework in patch 10.15, and it's either good or bad depending on who you ask. The rework has really split the community, in my honest opinion. You could go through pages and pages of changes, but the general consensus of Holy Paladin coming into the next patch is that it's still going to be a melee healer. You still want to use abilities like Crusader Strike. You're still determined by the game as a melee character, but at the end of the day you're going to be doing a lot more hard casting, specifically Flash of Light with things like Infusion of Light procs. And this can be either a good thing or a bad thing depending on who you ask. On top of that, there's probably going to be a huge emphasis on something like Tears Deliverance because it's being changed in terms of, again, working with Holy Shock, and now with Salvation you might actually become an upkeep spec with Holy Paladin because you'll want to maintain your Tears Deliverance for as long as possible because it'll provide consistent healing. And this might be popular in both raid and Mythic Plus environments, which is again a lot different from the previous patch. And on top of that, there's quite a few quality of life improvements in terms of Judgment. It now generates Holy Power. It also can consume Infusion of Light proc, which means it's going to be a lot more impactful in the next patch. But the general consensus, without going too much in the talent builds, without going too much in terms of talent changes, there is going to be a gameplay change both in raids and Mythic Plus. There's going to be a lot more emphasis on Tears Deliverance. There's going to be a lot more hard casting needed because there's been quite a substantial buffs to Flash of Light. We'll have to see how the raiding build is going to work out, especially for people who really enjoy that Avenging Crusader right now. There is a chance that Avenging Crusader build might be a bit less impactful, but again, the start of the next patch is going to be wild west, and there's going to be many builds emerging both for Mythic Plus and raid content. You also have to look at some of my favorite talent changes in terms of, or again, new talents introduced in terms of Daybreak, in terms of how they are going to interact with certain other talents. I think there's going to be a lot of combinations in terms of using Daybreak with something like Divine Toll because of the same cooldown. There is going to be a lot of combinations that are new to Holy Paladin, which might seem a little bit daunting because you'll need new keybinds, and there's probably going to be a lot of Holy Paladins who might actually add Flash of Light on their bars or mouse over macros. So generally there's going to be more hard casting, you're going to have more keys, and how is that going to impact your Mythic Plus performance, or again some predictions or what is happening right now. And you can see Subcreation. I made a disclaimer at the start of the video, it is not perfect. I generally would not think this is a true representation of which healer is strong. I would not have these healers at the very bottom. I think most of the healer or the balance of healers is pretty good. I would actually even place Holy Paladin in something like A tier because I actually believe a lot of the healers right now are somewhat comparable. Holy Paladin is doing quite well already and is getting a massive rework. A massive rework does not mean that Holy Paladin is going to still stay in S tier. No one is going to be 100% sure where Holy Paladin is going to go because you can have pages and pages of changes, but all that matters is how are the changes going to be tuned. Are you still going to be doing a lot of damage? Are you still going to be doing a lot of healing? In Mythic Plus, Holy Paladin healing windows are all about that Beacon of Virtue, which is getting a slight change. There's a lot of mana changes to Holy Paladin, which is going to be quite interesting to see how Holy Paladin is going to manage their mana both in Mythic Plus and raids. So the answer is, I don't know, honestly, because the tuning is probably going to be ongoing. If Holy Paladin is going to be absolutely overpowered, I think Blizzard is going to tune it down. I think Blizzard wants a pretty equal representation in Mythic Plus and raid situations. I generally believe that if a class is getting reworked, I think Blizzard is going to make them a little bit OP to some extent because they want the rework class to be somewhat popular. I think there's going to be a lot of people who either like or hate the changes right now because it is a lot more caster based. There's a lot more hard casting, which Holy Paladins haven't been used to that for quite a while. The fact that Holy Paladin still provides a lot of utility, and if Holy Paladin still retains the damage that it does and still retains those healing windows with Beacon of Virtue, I still think they're going to be quite strong. Tears Deliverance is going to provide a lot more continuous healing because it's looking to be strong in majority forms of content. Now, if we go to raid performance in terms of Aberrus for 10.1, this is again mythic performance. We're looking at 75 percentile. We're looking at HPS. A lot of these values don't mean a lot because your HPS values, you have Devo Aura with Aura Master in terms of damage reduction. That is not going to be represented here. What do I expect in 10.15? Honestly, who knows? Because Holy Paladin is going through so many changes. If Holy Paladin is going to be, again, the first week, if Holy Paladin is going to be the absolute king or climbs in HPS values, that means that in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, Holy Paladin is going to climb and climb more, because the first week is going to be wild west. People are probably still going to play their Holy Paladin like they used to play. They're probably not going to optimize the new build. There's probably going to be new talents emerging, new builds, new playstyles emerging. So the first week for Holy Paladin, in my opinion, if you want the perfect balance, Holy Paladin should not climb too much, because over the next couple of weeks afterwards, people will find better ways of playing the new spec and therefore climbing and climbing. So I don't know how Holy Paladin is going to turn out in terms of the meta, because they're already doing quite well in 10.1, and a new rework does not guarantee that Holy Paladin stays at the top. It could dip for all you know, but I am a betting man and I'm assuming that a rework class, Blizzard wants them to do quite well. So let me know how you feel about this new playstyle. Let me know. It almost feels like Blizzard wanted to have an or please everyone with the new playstyle, because you're still a melee healer, but you're hard casting a lot more. So are you trying to please both groups? Because Holy Paladin has been divided, or the class community has been divided for such a long time in Dragonflight in terms of, should I be a melee, or do I prefer the melee playstyle, or do I prefer the caster build? And I think Blizzard has tried to merge a bit of both in order to please all groups. Now let's go to Restoration Shaman, and I mentioned this at the start of the video. All the other healers beside Holy Paladin did not receive a huge amount of changes, but Shaman or Shaman class tree in general has a lot of these hybrid abilities in terms of ancestral guidance, and they have been on the radar for Blizzard in terms of nerfing them, because they want healing to be harder, or hybrid classes to hard cast more instead of relying on these abilities. I'm not 100% sure on this, but you can look. Ancestral Guidance now caps the amount of potential healing per tick at 20% of your maximum health up to 3 targets, which means it is a nerf to your Restoration Shaman, because again, AG used to be a pretty good way of reaching those big healing numbers or big cloudburst numbers. In order to compensate for this, Restoration Shaman healing has been increased by 3%. So overall, Resto Shaman is probably not going to change much, because AG has been nerfed. You're probably not going to be combining Ancestral Guidance with other cooldowns as much as you used to do, or it's probably going to be discouraged in general. Your healing has been increased, so you're probably just sitting there and just not changing too much in terms of viability for Mythic Plus and raids. There has been, again, you'll see spell and damage increased by 10%. Every single healer received a damage increase by 10% because primordial gems have been nerfed. So there's not a specific buff to Resto Shamans only. In terms of Resto Shaman viability in Mythic Plus, Resto Shaman has been doing pretty well. I still think it's one of the top Mythic Plus healers. I think it has dropped down a little bit because the tier set hasn't been too well. Again, the tier set has been buffed in the last couple of weeks or leading up to 10.15, because the tier set for Resto Shaman, both in raids and Mythic Plus, was somewhat lackluster, and they have buffed it in hopes of making or increasing Shaman perception, because Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus is quite great. He has a lot of utility. Its healing is okay. It's not the best healing out there, honestly. One of the problems that I encountered with Restoration Shaman in Mythic Plus is the fact that if you do play towards that tier set, and depending on which talents you're playing, the setup time can actually be quite long. And considering that this season is all about burst healing, or there is a lot of spot healing and burst healing requirements, it can sometimes feel a bit iffy to set up your healing. I think Resto Shaman is in a great position in Mythic Plus. In raid situations, if you're looking at pure HPS, it's near the bottom, and that's even with some of the buffs to the tier set. I don't think this is going to change. I don't think anything's changing to Resto Shaman. I think if you're playing Resto Shaman in raids, you're still, again, someone who brings that utility. Spirit Link Totem can sometimes be overvalued, but it's still a good thing to have. If you're looking for a healer that's gonna top HPS meters in raids, Resto Shaman is not going to be it. You need to get used to that tier set, which honestly has been one of the banes of Restoration Shaman when coming into Dragonflight Season 2, because it's probably been one of the weakest ones. Again, it has been buffed, so Blizzard acknowledges that fact. I think overall Resto Shaman is going to stay where it is. A very, very good healer, or very decent healer in Mythic Plus, and in terms of pure HPS, it's not going to be topping meters in raid. Now let's move on to Preservation Evokers. And Preservation Evokers on paper actually received quite a few changes when you compare it to other healers besides Holy Paladin, and the general consensus of Evoker changes is that it's okay. It's not really maybe a tiny buff to your HPS or tiny buff to the class in general, nothing too major. It's not going to shift or change the meta, but let's look at some of the changes in terms of Evoker. Your healing has been increased by 2%. That is to offset the fact that Rewind has been nerfed. Now the Rewind nerf, it scales on your group size. If you're someone who does heroic raiding week in and week out with 30 people, Rewind nerf is going to be felt. If you're doing smaller raid sizes, you're probably not going to feel that Rewind nerf too much. So it really depends on the raid size you're doing. In terms of other changes, again, Exhilarating Burst has been buffed because there is going to be more choices for talents that you're going to use as Preservation Evoker, which is probably good. They're nerfing Vaulted and Kindness 2-set bonus because there's been some cheesing with Preservation Evokers where Evokers are running 2-set bonus from the previous tier and using Reversion and getting some pretty decent healing numbers. Life Giver's Flame has been changed now to heal up to 5 injured targets split evenly amongst them, which is a pretty sizable change in terms of how Life Giver's Flame is going to heal, because a lot of the times you're using Life Giver's Flame in Mythic Plus content. I'm going to be testing these changes in Mythic Plus because, again, Life Giver's Flame is something very popular in Mythic Plus, not so popular in raids. We'll have to see if that's going to change anything in terms of that. In terms of talents, there has been some class talents. You have Potent Mana, and again, this is something that is going to provide additional healing and damage to other healers in your raid. So you can bribe healers. You can say like, hey, if someone wants this buff, give me 50,000 gold. I mean, it depends how you want to do it, but this is going to be something that other healers will really want in order to parse, unless Warcraft Logs is going to filter this buff. And some other quality of life changes that honestly you don't really have to cover, because I think, again, if you're looking at Mythic Plus content, I think Preservation Evoker is doing actually pretty well. I think if you know how to play your Preservation Evoker in Mythic Plus, the healing output of Evoker is absolutely insane, especially if you go for that healing build with like Renewing Breath, or there's so many different combinations of talent builds that you can run in something like Vortex Pinnacle, because Vortex Pinnacle is one of the highest HPS dungeons and you just go full healing build for that. I think Evoker's healing potential is really, really strong if you know how to play this. Again, your tier set bonus makes your Spirit Bloom insanely powerful. Spirit Bloom is one of the kings in terms of Mythic Plus and raids. In raid, if you're looking at the pure HPS, it is the king right now in terms of pure HPS healing. I do think there is some new builds emerging for Preservation Evoker in terms of Emerald Blossom, Cycle of Life build. If you're doing specific bosses like Rashok, it's very, very popular. It does require certain precision in terms of how you want to do your burst healing with Cycle of Life, because it does have a delay and things like that. You need to anticipate damage. I'm not going to talk too much about this. Preservation Evoker is still probably going to be one of the top HPS healers in raid. I think the difference between HPS healers or the HPS off healers in raid, it's not that big. So if you like Preservation Evoker, play Preservation Evoker. It is a very, very different healer from others. And in terms of Mythic Plus, we talked about this, I still think Preservation Evoker is a very, very solid healer. And if you do play Evoker, Augmentation is coming in the next patch, which is probably going to be played by nearly everyone because the new class hype. And now let's move on to Mistweaver Monk. Not a lot of changes here because there's been quite a few adjustments to healers, because every single healer received at least 10% damage increase, and certain healers get additional healing from that 10% damage increase, and Blizzard is trying to nerf or adjust the talent. So you can see right now in terms of the class tree, you're getting new defensive options. Nothing too amazing, nothing too groundbreaking. All of the monk specs are getting this. You can check it out in terms of PTR. Again, nothing really out of the ordinary, or just giving you more options in terms of your class tree. In terms of other changes specifically to Mistweaver, again, you see that 10% damage, which is happening to every single healer. Ancient Teaching now heals for 135% of damage instead of 150. This is purely a change based on the fact that your damage is being increased. The same exact thing is happening to this with Priest and things like that, classes that get benefit from healing from increased damage. In terms of Font of Life, you can see it now increases Essence Font initial heal by 25% instead of being a static amount, which they're trying to make this talent feel more appealing because it's not being run by any Mistweavers, or not a lot of Mistweavers, both in raids and Mythic Plus. There is going to be a chance that if you are running a specific build, Font of Life might be appealing, but again, if you are running that Clouded Focus build in raids, Clouded Focus build to some extent ignores Essence Font, and that might not change in the next patch. Let me know how you feel about that Clouded Focus build in raids. Again, depending on which bosses you're doing, let me know how you feel about the changes. And again, the same thing you're seeing in terms of Awakened Phalanx now heals for a specific or 70% of damage done instead of 75, which is another change in terms of your damage increase. In terms of viability for Mistweaver Monk and things like that, nothing is really changing in terms of the class changes. Again, most of the class changes for healers outside of Holy Paladin are just to do with the fact that they're getting 10% damage buff, and then they're just trying to change a few things, and they're also reordering or buffing dead talents. That's basically the consensus. Mistweaver Monk is definitely not D tier in Mythic Plus, that is basically showcased by Subcreation, because this is more about the player base more than anything else. I actually think Mistweaver Monk is a lot stronger than people give it credit. I think Mistweaver Monk can be really fun to play and things like that. I think it's one of those things where Monk is one of the least played classes in the game, and therefore there's less people to push Mythic Plus content, there's less people to push raid content and things like that, and it's a snowball effect that just leads Mistweavers falling all the way there. I would actually place Mistweaver a lot higher with a lot of other healers. If you know how to play Mistweaver Monk, you're going to have a fun and good time in Mythic Plus. I actually think Mistweaver Monk damage and healing is absolutely comparable to some of the top-end Mythic Plus healers, and I think the thing that actually drags down Mistweaver Monk is the fact that they don't have something like Bloodlust or Balrez in order to fill in your group's utility. You just need to get that invite, which is honestly the biggest barrier of entry to Monk right now. In terms of raids, you can see Mistweaver Monk HPS is actually pretty sizable. You can do a good amount of damage depending on which build you're running. You can do a good amount of healing. Again, Monk is not in a bad position if you're looking at the overall potential of the class. It's just that no one is playing Monk, and therefore there's less people pushing content, and therefore the community perception of Mistweaver is falling and falling down. Nothing is really going to change about Mistweaver Monk in the next patch. There's a lot of people who are unhappy because Blizzard did pay attention to Mistweaver Monks. They tried to do a bit of a rework to Mistweaver Monks, and then they kind of forgot about them. I don't think Mistweaver Monks are in a bad position. I think the community perception is what puts them in the bad position. If you enjoy Mistweaver Monk, give it a go. It is a fun healer that can also be very rewarding. Just try to bypass that community perception or queue. And now let's go to Restoration Druid, and again, the same kind of consensus. Quite a few changes that are similar to Restoration Shaman, because Restoration Druids have Nature's Vigil, or Druids in general have Nature's Vigil, and these hybrid abilities are being nerfed by Blizzard. And on top of that, you can see a new talent, Rising Light. Falling Night increases your damage and healing by 3% during the day, and increases your versatility by 2% during the night. I feel these extremely passive talents are not interesting or fun. I'm not sure why Blizzard is adding this, because I don't think it adds a lot of gameplay changes to Druids in general, but I think a lot of people are going to try and pick this up because it goes in the same place as improved Sunfire. And then on top of that, specifically to Restoration Druid, you can see damage has been increased by 25%. You might be like, wow, they're getting a huge DPS boost. You have to remember, 10% damage increase has been applied to every single healer. So the Nature's Vigil nerf in terms of the duration, that is being offset by increasing your damage additionally by 15%. So I'm not 100% sure how this is going to equate to the overall DPS of Restoration Druids, because it's relatively hard to calculate or just dependent on your gameplay, but Nature's Vigil is a very potent ability in terms of increasing your damage as Resto Druid without having to do too much DPS, because if you're a Restoration Druid who does raiding content, you're going to be upset about the Nature's Vigil nerf, because you can heal and you can passively deal damage by just healing as a Resto Druid in raids, and that is a pretty decent way of adding damage without incurring additional mana cost. Now you might have to apply that Moonfire, Sunfire, depending on the content of the bosses you're doing, in order to provide more damage, which means more mana usage. But a lot of Resto Druids don't want to use additional mana because of that Potion of Chill Clarity nerfs that happen, but that is only relevant if your Resto Druid is doing raid content and wants to keep up with that DPS. Overall, we'll have to see how the new talent is going to work out. We'll have to see how the damage changes are going to change your gameplay, because there's going to be a lot more emphasis in terms of how you play or DPS as Resto Druid. You're no longer going to be carried by Nature's Vigil, because you can have a lot of moments in Mythic Plus where you apply your Nature's or use your Nature's Vigil with something like Flourish, and you're like, hey, there's nothing to heal, but I'm gonna do a lot of healing right now because I want to boost my Nature's Vigil. And I think Blizzard is not a huge fan of that gameplay. In terms of Resto Druid viability for Mythic Plus, I think Resto Druids are in a good position. I think your HPS values are really strong. I think your tier can be strong in terms of providing continuous healing with flourishes and things like that. Again, I would place multiple healers in a similar position here. I don't think this subcreation data is all that. It's basically showing most popular specs. If you want to deal damage as Restoration Druid, Nature's Vigil is not going to be able to carry you as much in the next patch, but I think a lot of people enjoyed the min-maxy version of Resto Druid in order to go into different forms and things like that. Again, let me know how you feel about it, because in order to optimize your damage as Resto Druid, it's a lot harder than something like Preservation Evoker, who has only a couple of buttons in order to do their max DPS, versus Resto Druid, who has a plethora of abilities in order to min-max your DPS. Bare minimum, Moonfire, Sunfire if you're doing pokes and things like that. Overall, I think Resto Druid is doing pretty well. I think there can be certain lack of spot healing depending if you're running poke situations, because there's a lot of spot healing needed right now in dungeons, and if you don't prepare for that spot healing capabilities, it can be pretty rough. In terms of Resto Druid for raids, again, we're looking at Aberrus, we're looking at 75 percentile. You're one of the top HPS healers, I think. if you know how to play your Resto Druid, if you know how to ramp, if you know how to optimize your HPS, again, it is a healer that requires you to know the damage patterns in order to really get the maximum potential of your Druid. If you know how to do that, you're gonna have a good time. You can have certain mana issues. Again, we talked about Potion of Chill Clarity, nerfs, and things like that. I think Resto Druid in terms of pure HPS and raids is doing really well. I think in Mythic Plus it's doing quite well. And if you can min-max your Resto Druid, you're going to have a really good time. You just need to really like the class, and in Mythic Plus you need to like that form shifting DPS optimization. And now let's talk about priests, and I'm gonna try and cover both of the healing specs here because they do share the class tree and there's new abilities happening to the class tree. But we're gonna start off with Discipline Priest. Now, priests in general are getting a new talent, Benevolence, increases the healing of your spells by 3%, shares the choice node with Power Word Life. Now, Power Word Life is one of those things that Discipline Priest, Holy Priest use in Mythic Plus content and raid content. It is a very popular, I don't want to say mandatory node that you need to pick up, but again, it's one of those things that a lot of priests are going to have, and it's going to provide you with that spot healing capabilities, which can be extremely nice to certain specs like Discipline Priest that can lack that spot healing in certain situations. I think it's good that Blizzard is trying to introduce more choices in terms of talents that feel almost mandatory, because I know there's quite a few priests out there who might be like, I don't want an additional ability with Power of Life, I don't press it enough, I don't have a weak warrior that tracks the HP thresholds, I'm just going to use something super passive and I'm just going to pick Benevolence and I'm just going to forget about it. In terms of other talents, Essence Devourer attacks from your Shadowfield and Mindbender, siphon life from enemies, healing a nearby injured ally. We'll have to see how this is going to scale. Pretty good that Blizzard is trying to introduce additional choices in terms of talent nodes that feel somewhat unwanted or somewhat mandatory. And I think Blizzard is trying to shake up some of the class tree. Again, let me know how I feel about this. This is a Discipline Priest coverage here, so we're going to talk about Discipline Priest. There's a new talent, and it's not really a new talent. It's kind of like merging from the past. Luminous Barrier used to be kind of a meme value here, but creates a shield on allies within 40 yards, absorbing damage on each of them for 10 seconds. Absorption is increased by 100% but not in raid. Luminous Barrier returns the choice node against Power with Barrier. So now you have to decide, do you take Power with Barrier or Luminous Barrier? I haven't looked at the scaling of this. Historically speaking, Luminous Barrier has been something that's been used by Discipline Priest if you could not stack, because it is very hard to beat the potential of the whole raid stacking in Power with Barrier and getting that 25% damage reduction. It is an undervalued ability if you can get your raid to stack. It is so strong and undervalued by so many people, but without looking at the scaling or the value of Luminous Barrier, it makes sense introducing this, because I know a lot of Discipline Priests who want to parse or look better on the meters, they're going to use Luminous Barrier just to be parse lords, because guess what? Power with Barrier does not show up on Warcraft logs. And there's other changes. Every single healer received that 10% damage increase because of the Primordial Gem nerfs, and therefore Discipline Priest actually gets healing from increased damage, and they are going to offset this by nerfing Atonement Transfer to 36% of damage instead of 40%, and this actually ends up being like a slight overall nerf, which is kind of funny because I don't think Discipline Priest is all that amazing in terms of pure HPS for raid. I actually think Blizzard is extremely scared about making Discipline Priest OP, especially in raid situations, and this is why I think Luminous Barrier is probably not going to be buffed to be absolutely mandatory, because if Luminous Barrier becomes overpowered, I think Blizzard is going to be nerfing that, because historically speaking, Blizzard has been very scared about Discipline Priest balance, especially raid content. Just a quick summary in terms of how Discipline Priest is doing in Mythic Plus. I actually think Discipline Priest has fallen off a little bit in the last month or so in terms of Mythic Plus representation, because Discipline Priest received quite a bit of rework in the last couple of patches and things like that. A lot of people were flocking to Discipline Priest to try it out and things. And honestly, Discipline I tried it out. I thought it was doing really well. I thought it was really fun. But because of the really high HPS requirements, especially in tyrannical keys, especially in these really world first tyrannical keys, if you're doing like 26, 27, 25, so again, really high keys, certain situations, Discipline Priest can actually struggle in terms of meeting that HPS requirement. If you're doing plus 20 keys, don't worry about it. If you enjoy your Discipline Priest and those 20 keys, keep playing Discipline Priest. It is extremely fun. It is a fun healer, because if you enjoy that damage or healing through DPS, it is the healer for you. If you're looking to push 26, 27 keys, Discipline Priest might have some problems when trying to meet that HPS requirement, because I've seen this with a lot of the high-end pushers, but that's just the general consensus that I've seen. It's not going to affect a lot of the population. In terms of raid, if you're looking for a pure HPS healer, you're probably going to swap to Holy Priest, because they're doing quite well in terms of pure HPS. In terms of progression for Mythic raiding, Barrier can be really strong. I talked about this. 25% damage reduction if the whole raid can stack is absolutely insane. In terms of the damage that you can provide, Discipline Priest can be really fun. Generally speaking, I think Discipline Priest has been one of those specs where Blizzard is very scared in terms of making it overpowered. I talked about this as well. I think Blizzard is very, very, very scared about making them overpowered. Generally speaking, I think if you're looking for HPS, you're going to swap the Holy Priest, which is a lot easier to play. With this Swing Priest, you need to know the incoming damage patterns. You need to know how the damage or the boss fight works. With Holy Priest, you can get away by just reacting to damage and healing. Again, I'm not talking about the cooldown assignments. You still need to anticipate when to use cooldowns in order to get Holy War Salvation, things like that. But again, Holy Priest is easier to play than this in most form of content. But with Holy Priest actually received quite a few changes. You have a new talent, Epiphany, which your Holy Worlds have a specific chance to reset the cooldown of Prayer of Mending. I'm not a huge fan of RNG talents, especially for healers, because it can be somewhat memey, but the fact that it does work with your Prayer of Mending, which is pretty a significant portion of your gameplay or your healing in this tier, because of the fact that you have a tier set around this, it doesn't take a genius to notice that anything to do with Prayer of Mending is probably going to have more impact in raids. But I generally didn't look at this talent, or I did not get to test too much of Holy Priest new talent changes, so I'm not sure if this is going to be something that Holy Priests are going to be using. Let me know if this is something that you might use. Besides that, there's been quite a few changes in terms of your talents or the position of talents and some of the DPS talents. So Searing Light has been removed, which has been used by Holy Priest in Mythic Plus environment. There has been a lot of emphasis about Holy Priest damage in Mythic Plus, and Blizzard has buffed it in the previous patches and things like that, because Blizzard is aware of the fact that Holy Priest damage has been somewhat lackluster when compared to other healers in that Mythic Plus content. Outside of that, Burning Vehemence has been moved to Searing Light's position and is now a 1-point talent, which gives you more choices, especially when doing that Mythic Plus environment, because Burning Vehemence is a pretty popular talent choice pick for Holy Priest in 5-man dungeons. So in terms of Holy Priest Mythic Plus viability, again, this is a chart for 10.1. This is I don't truly believe in this ranking, and I mentioned this throughout the whole video. I still don't think Holy Priest is good enough to go into that A or S tier. I still think Holy Priest is a little bit lower to other healers. I do know that Blizzard is buffing Holy Priest damage to make them a lot easier or like more comparable to other healers, because damage, it's not as important this season. It's way more important to keep people alive than provide more DPS as a healer. Again, I talked about this in multiple videos, but I still don't think Holy Priest deserves that top tier. I still think it's a little bit below others, but not by a significant margin. And if you enjoy Holy Priest in Mythic Plus, I think you should play Holy Priest. In terms of raids, I actually think Holy Priest is actually really good in terms of what it provides. Not only it's good in terms of pure HPS, it also provides some significant damage reduction. When I say damage reduction, I mean Symbol of Hope, reducing the cooldown of defensives for other classes or other players in your raid, and therefore they can use those defensives. And a lot of the times, that might be the difference between a player surviving a certain mechanic and player dying. And I actually think Symbol of Hope and Holy Priest can provide so much, because not only you're providing Symbol of Hope, which is specific to Holy Spec, but you're also providing Power Infusion, which is specific to Priest. There's multiple reasons to have a Holy Priest in your raid group. I think they're actually one of the top tier healers. You might look at this and you're like, yo, Preservation of Evoker is doing more HPS than Holy Priest. That doesn't mean anything, because I would still have a Holy Priest over Preservation of Evoker, because Holy Priest provides that Symbol of Hope and he provides that Power Infusion. Preservation of Evoker provides more HPS. It has a very lackluster raid buff. There is a lot of, like, this chart does not showcase what healer is the best. Don't look at pure HPS as the way to do it. Unless you're someone who's just looking to top HPS meters, this chart means nothing. So I actually think Holy Priest is one of the top tier healers in raid, and I don't think that's going to change at 10.15. And I think Holy Priest could use a little bit of love, and I think Holy Priest is actually getting a little bit of love in terms of Mythic Plus, but I still don't think the community perception of Holy Priest is going to rise all that much. I still think most priests are going to swap the discipline. And again, if you like Holy Priest, keep playing Holy Priest. So what is the consensus of this video in terms of Mythic Plus, in terms of raids? Honestly, play or stick with the healer that you really enjoy, because I don't think the healer balance is going to change all that much in the next patch. The only healer that's getting a huge rework is going to be Holy Paladin. And I think the fact that Holy Paladin is getting reworked, regardless if it's good or bad, is going to have a bunch of healers swapping to Holy Paladin to see how it's going to do. Because historically speaking, if a class is getting a rework, it's probably going to be doing quite well, because Blizzard doesn't want the new rework to feel like a failure. But let's be honest, if Holy Paladin is going to be absolutely overpowered, Blizzard are going to nerf them, because Blizzard has been on ball or on point in terms of trying to keep healer balance relatively good. You're looking at sub-creation information here. This is auto-generated information that honestly is incorrect in so many different ways, because it's basically the most popular spec. In my opinion, most healers, including Holy Paladin right now in 10.1, would probably be somewhere in A tier. Maybe this Winged Priest is going to be on the lower end when you're doing those 27 keys and you can't, or it's going to be a little bit harder to meet that HPS requirement. Maybe Holy Priest is going to be a little bit lower, but not by a substantial amount. And Mistweaver Monk is not D tier, I can guarantee you that. It's just no one is playing Mistweaver right now. So the balance of healers is actually really good, but in 10.15 for Mythiclus, there's going to be a lot of flocking towards that Holy Paladin. There's going to be, I know for a fact that there's going to be a lot of healers that are going to swap to Holy Paladin, and they might not like the playstyle because there's going to be a lot more hard casting, a lot more emphasis on Tears Deliverance. It's going to be an upkeep spec to some extent because you need to maintain that Tears Deliverance to do that consistent healing both in raids and Mythiclus. Again, subject to change. But generally speaking, a rework to a new healer does not mean they're going to be S tier. There is a small possibility that the rework is going to drop Holy Paladin lower because Holy Paladin is one of the top healers right now in 10.1. It would be hilarious that after rework they're going to drop because most people are going to blame Blizzard. It's like, why are they changing it? They're already doing Holy Paladin is already in a good position. But my consensus, most healers are in a good position for Mythiclus unless you're doing some of the world highest keys. In that case, 90% of healers are in a good position. And that's not a bad situation to be in. In terms of rating, I still feel it's going to be somewhat similar. Again, I'm not sure where Holy Paladin is going to end up in terms of pure HPS. Honestly, this is a pure guesstimate right now because Holy Paladin is getting so many changes. We'll have to see. I'm really interested to see where Holy Paladin is going to end up in terms of pure HPS. If you're looking at the week 1 information, week 1 information is probably going to be a representation of Holy Paladin at its weakest because it's going to take multiple weeks before people are going to figure out the best spec or the best way to play Holy Paladin because most people are going to play Holy Paladin like they used to play in 10.1, and that is not the correct way to play because in 10.15 the Holy Paladin gameplay is going to change a lot more, and once people are figuring that out in week 2, week 3, week 4, Holy Paladin is going to show you the true representation in terms of the bets or how much HPS you can achieve. So play whichever healer you enjoyed the most. Honestly, that's the whole consensus of the video. In terms of the changes, I think a lot of healers are getting some quality of life changes in terms of changing some of these talents that seem to be mandatory or almost dead. No one picks them and Blizzard is trying to change it. Let me know how you feel about healers. I apologize for this really long video. I just cannot stop talking. I really do apologize for this. Don't follow these tier lists too much, especially if you're not doing the highest content in the world. I genuinely feel the balance is in a really good spot. Let me know which healer you're playing in 10.15 or which healer you're most excited for.